listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. There are fears we are heading towards a second round of milk wars at the big supermarkets, and the people who produce our milk are worried.
From the last wars to now, there's nearly half the farmers have left with climatical changes that were all in, the reality of the life. More red tape, more inflation. We're just getting squeezed out of the industry.
In today's deep dive, we're exploring why our dairy farmers are speaking out about dropping milk prices at the supermarket and the real cost behind a cheaper litre. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Helen Smith. It's Monday, October 21st.
Morning, Sasha. Supporters for the King and Queen have dwarfed those who turned out to protest as Charles and Camilla kicked off their Aussie Royal Tour in Sydney yesterday. It was a pretty chilled day to account for the monarch's health as he has cancer treatment, starting with a church service in the CBD and ending with a laid-back reception at Admiralty House. In between the two, though, the King attended an event at the New South Wales Parliament to mark the bicentenary of the state's Legislative Council, which first met on August 2nd, 1824. He even cracked jokes while presenting the gift of an hourglass.
It is, in fact, an hourglass, a speech timer, to sit in the chamber and bear witness to the Legislative Council's next chapter.
Oh, very funny from the monarch. Look, he didn't stay long enough, though, for the lunch of octopus and lemon meringue pie that was held in his honour. He made a polite but swift exit. Look, next up is Canberra, where they'll be greeted by local kids when they touch down this morning. Charles and Camilla will visit the Australian War Memorial. They'll greet the public, then head to Parliament House to meet with Anthony Albanese before heading back to Sydney in the afternoon. Helen, I found it really interesting, actually, how many people turned out. I suppose maybe people our age aren't really that interested in what the monarchy is up to. I remember hearing someone going, oh yeah, Charles is here. Like over the weekend, someone making the comment that Charles and Camilla were here, and the other person going, oh really? I had no idea. Like people aren't that aware of what is happening. But yeah, there were lots of people who turned out, mainly kids and then like older people. So I think that tells you where the heartland of their supporter base is. There were a lot of gifts handed to the pair yesterday, and they did actually do like an impromptu meet and greet with the crowd. Apparently the police scrambled to protect them because they hadn't planned to do this shaking hands and meeting with the public thing. But they were given flowers, of course, rugby balls, cricket balls, also kangaroo jerky, which I found interesting. Royal protocol, interestingly, you take the gifts so as not to look impolite, but you don't keep them because there's all sorts of security risks with that. What then happens to those gifts? They're either divvied up among royal staff or they're donated to charity. So keep that in mind. If you ever want to give a royal something, they're probably not going to keep it.
Changing pace now as we head to the Middle East, where as many as 87 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on northern Gaza. Local authorities say civilian neighbourhoods were targeted in the attack and more than 60 victims were trapped under the rubble. Children are believed to be among those killed. The IDF says it's investigating reports of the incident, but claims the number of casualties issued by Palestinian authorities were exaggerated.
This comes as the US investigates a reported leak of highly classified intelligence which detailed Israel's plan of retaliation against Iran. The documents were leaked on Telegram by an account called Middle East Spectator. Now, these are Pentagon documents, so they are highly, highly classified. A leak is supposed to trigger an FBI investigation. The FBI hasn't commented on whether it's looking into it, but historically, they will have to look into this.
Over in the ACT, the leader of the Canberra Liberals has agreed that some members of the party are more focused on being right-wing rather than being elected. It comes after the Liberals lost their 7th consecutive ACT election over the weekend, with Labor expected to form government in the next coming weeks, extending its record reign in the ACT to beyond a quarter of a century, which is pretty wild. Outgoing Liberal Nicole Lauder told the ABC that, quote, a couple of very powerful players in the party have pushed the Liberals too far to the right, end quote. When asked to respond to those comments, the leader of the party, Elizabeth Lee, said she agreed.
You might remember Elizabeth Lee made headlines last week because she was caught on camera flipping the bird to a journalist after having a very testy exchange. Labor's been in power for so long in the ACT that, you know, it'd be really hard to fight an election campaign knowing that your chances, no matter how hard you try, are pretty slim. So I understand her kind of getting a little bit frustrated and just going, screw you, mate.
Yeah.
But yes, she did apologise. It's worth noting she apologised for that, said her emotions got the better of her. But yeah, Labor still in the ACT. Elon Musk says he'll give away $1 million US, that's about 1.5 million Australian, every day to a Donald Trump supporter. The Tesla boss says he'll hand over the cash to a registered voter in the key swing state of Pennsylvania until Election Day through his Trump-supporting political action committee, America PAC. So Musk handed out his first mil on Saturday, picking the winner through a lottery-style draw. And if he keeps his word, he'll be giving away around 25 million Australian dollars. So far, he's donated 75 mil US to America PAC.
So the petition these voters have to sign is to pledge their support for the First and Second Amendments. That's religious freedom and the right to bear arms. Once signed, their name will go into the draw. This then allows the organisation to gather contact details for more potential voters for Trump. Swing states are big targets at the moment for Harris and Trump, and over the weekend, Kamala Harris celebrated her 60th birthday with a church visit in Georgia as part of an effort to court early voters, while Donald Trump is gearing up to hold a battleground event in Pennsylvania and visit a local McDonald's.
Yeah, do you know what he's doing there, Helen? He is going to be making chippies. He's going to be, apparently, he's going to be standing over the fryer. They call it fries in America, obviously. But yeah, he's become really fixated with this idea of going and making chips at Macca's ever since Kamala Harris revealed, which actually came out years ago when she was campaigning for US president the first time around. It came out that she said in her biography that, I worked at Macca's as a teen. Totally normal. I would say like 50% of the American population probably worked at Macca's at some point. Don't quote me on that stat. That's totally made up. But he doesn't believe her, and she hasn't bothered to try and correct the record because why would you? So yes, he's going to stand over the fryer and make these chips at this Pennsylvania Macca's, as you do. And I thought it would be worth noting as well. I know I keep doing a countdown every week when we mention a US election story. I'll let you know how long we've got to go. There's just over 2 weeks. It's really soon. It'll be Wednesday in 2 weeks' time. So, lots to come and lots to then play out following the vote. So it's going to be a crazy month in US politics.
Yeah, look, Sash, do you think Trump's going to say, do you want fries with that?
Oh, I hope so.
And an airport in New Zealand has introduced a time limit on hugs. Dunedin has put up signs at its drop-off area that literally says, max hug time 3 minutes. For fonder farewells, please use the car park. Some people are apparently outraged if the comment section of a Facebook post is anything to go by, one commenter calling it inhumane.
Oh, my Lord. I think that's a bit of an overstatement. Look, the Dunedin Airport CEO, his name is Daniel De Bono, he weighed in on the topic, arguing that moving customers along quickly allows more people to get more hugs, which is so lovely. I do love watching more the arrivals at the airport. I find farewells really sad. I'm like, oh, you're going to miss them so much. But when you're at the arrivals hall and you're watching people come home or like arrive in Australia or wherever you are, and the hugs and the happiness, oh, I love it. But I've got to say, there aren't many people I would spend 3 minutes hugging at an airport to say goodbye. Like, maybe my parents and maybe my husband and my dog, obviously. But I don't think I care about anyone else for a more than 3 minute hug. And if I was saying goodbye to them for a long trip, I wouldn't do it. You know, those drop-off spots are so I get so stressed.
They're hectic.
I'm like, guys, go, go, go. And there's cars honking and there's like people blowing whistles at you. And I'm like, like the last place I want to say a fond farewell to anyone is at the drop-off section of an airport. Oh, crazy rule, crazy rule. Helen, thank you so much for joining us for the headlines today. Next up, it's your deep dive getting into the threat of a potential second round of milk wars.
How much should you be paying for a bottle of milk? It's a simple question, but behind it there's a complicated and heated conversation about cost of living, cost of production, and the inherent value of a really hard day's work. We might be entering a new era of the milk wars, a decade after the Australian industry went toe-to-toe with our national supermarket giants over how much they should be charging for a bottle of milk at the checkout. The cost of milk in major Australian supermarkets has gone backwards for the first time in a long time. Coles and Woolworths reduced the price of its generic fresh milk last month by 5 cents to $1.55 per litre. While discount supermarket chain Aldi briefly bucked the trend and held firm at $1.60, but before long ended up matching the price of Coles and Woolworths in October. It's the first time supermarket milk prices have gone backwards since January 2011, when Australia's big three supermarkets slashed their prices to $1 a litre, sparking outrage from dairy farmers across the country. But supermarkets are clearly reading the room of a cost of living crisis that is impacting consumers shopping in their stores. And when almost everyone is finding it tough, it's difficult as a consumer to argue against paying less for something as essential as a bottle of milk. But what do those in the industry think of this recent price drop? We thought we should ask them directly. Ben Bennett is the Australian Dairy Farmers Association president, and Adam Jenkins is a former dairy farmer. I asked Adam how the previous milk wars impacted him when he was a farmer.
It's a tricky question because it's, I think it devalues the product that farmers get and the work that we do. You always get a sense of, $1 a litre for milk and water's dearer and Coca-Cola's dear. It's sort of all the hard work you do. It makes it pretty tricky, but it's a complicated system because our milk goes into exports and cheese and all sorts of things. So it's not just a direct relationship to the supermarket, but again, it does devalue the work that we do over a whole period of time.
Ben also added that since the first milk wars, many farmers have left the industry entirely.
Well, from the last wars to now, there's nearly half the farmers have left. So with climatical changes that we're all in, the reality of the life, more red tape, more inflation, we're just getting squeezed out of the industry. So there's not a lot of incentive to work 7 days a week from dawn to dusk.
Adam added to this point, explaining some of the factors that are leading farmers to do this.
Labour is a big one. The work, though, that we do and getting the right skilled labour and the cost of labour is obviously one of the bigger challenges. I think climate volatility is real, and particularly this year in the southwestern Victoria where I am, it is drought, and so your cost of production is high because you've had to buy in extra feed sources and so forth. So we've got an increase in cost of production from the inputs we're putting into the system, and so the milk prices sort of hasn't quite followed that. The second thing I think was the clawback that we had back in 2016, lost a lot of trust with dairy farmers of supplying your processor. And I know the ACCC have tried to put a code of conduct in place to try and minimise the risk and certainly not having a clawback system. But I don't think it's gone far enough. I think we've actually created more volatility in the system now than we did back then. We're getting winners and losers from processors to farmers on a yearly basis now, and that's not good and sustainable for the industry.
Adam and Ben both spoke on what the government has done and how much involvement they should have, and if it would actually help the industry as a whole.
I don't want to see government being our bedfellow on every aspect. It's just, at the end of the day, in business, we all need a lick of the ice cream, effectively. Okay, and farmers are primary producers, and they are at the commencement of the food chain. And we'd like the people who've got this power and influence to have a little bit more appreciation of the greater community that actually puts the stuff on the shelf in the first place.
Here's what Adam had to say about the clawback and the code of conduct that's been put in place, and if he really thinks it's gone far enough to support dairy farmers.
No, I think when it initially came in, we've tried to remove all the risk coming back on the supply side of a farmer, wearing a lot of the risk in the pricing, and we've tried to remove that as an ACCC code of conduct, and it's between the processor and the farmer. But when I was involved heavily in the dairy industry, we were saying actually we need it through the whole supply chain. We've got the retailer and the processor and the farmer, so we've got three moving bits. And as I said, we haven't quite gone far enough because now we've got a system where it's really volatile. Some years people are winners, particularly processors win this year. Farmers will lose out with the pricing. Next year we might win. And then the retailers on the end of that going, oh, well, it's the cost of living. We'll just look like the good guys and drop the price completely. And so then we've got this whole thing. It's a dynamic environment, but we need more transparency through that supply chain.
With milk prices going up and down over the last 20 years, I asked Adam and Ben how the impacts of the cost of living have been changing shoppers' buying habits.
As a nation, we're all about supporting our own and doing the right thing. But when it comes down to it, we really buy with our pocket. And, you know, we saw that last year, particularly with our higher milk price and a lot of imports coming in. We saw people just moving to the imports that are coming in because they were a cheaper product at the time.
I fully understand that a lot of consumers, no different to dairy farmers, there are fragile consumers that need to be driven by their back pocket, and that's fair enough. We definitely not questioning that. But those that have got a little bit more there, and like you say, it's only 5 cents, but that's what drives our profit margin to a considerable scale. There are other alternative brands. Consider giving them some patronage would be great.
With all of this in mind, the future of the dairy industry in Australia has been in question. And what would happen if milk prices kept dropping?
You mean down, down, down? Well, that'll be the same thing with dairy farmers, sadly. They'll just become extinct and you'll be more and more reliant on imported product. It's a bit of a sad shame. Like we're a rather large country. We're in fact a continent and we can't even produce milk. Like it's what a sad state of affairs. At the end of the day, these supermarkets, they're very clever people. They're in it to make some money, which is their prerogative, okay? My question is the sustainability of it. If a huge portion of the supermarket shelf is skewed down to the no frills, no nothing, no margin, let's not make any money aspect, well, sadly, it's going to pull the rest of the industry down with it.
But Adam believes there are still many positives to look forward to.
In terms of the future, we're just seeing probably bigger farms now than we did. Probably that labour thing that's coming into it. People aren't probably coming back on the farm, or if they are, they're expanding their farms. So we're sort of seeing a rationalisation in the industry of bigger farms, and they're having that labour. If they can get the right labour, you know, there's still some real positives out there. But there is other people that have decided to exit for whatever reason, and that could be labour, stage of life. We've got to be realistic. Like the stage of life is certainly a big thing amongst farmers when they're getting older, and the asset growth that we've had over the last 5 years is significant. So people are deciding, do I keep working like that, or do I cash in my asset and put it into the super and go and retire? So there's some real challenges there, but there's still opportunities too, and it's just going to look different.
And Ben also wanted us to keep this in mind when we're doing our next grocery shop.
Food doesn't originate from the supermarket shelf or that fridge. There's a true, genuine Australian families behind that.
That was Ben Bennett, the Australian Dairy Farmers Association president, and Adam Jenkins, a former dairy farmer there, explaining how impactful a 5-cent drop on a bottle of milk can be for the industry. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. And hey, while you're there, if you follow or subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, it really does help us, and it helps the product get out there and helps us keep making the content that you love. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search for Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed with another episode this afternoon from 3. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.
Listener.